name is Ole Jacobi. I'm born in Greenland in 1934 on the 7th of February in very cold weather. We were living in a small town at that time. There were no hospitals, there were no doctors. Less than a year, when I was small, a year old, we went to the capital of Greenland, called Nuuk today, and we lived there for a couple of years. My younger sister was born there. My father was in the Greenland trade, Royal Greenland Trade, it was called at that time, and had a job where he bought from the hunters skin, blubber, and teeth of whales, and he sold coffee and all kinds of stuff that they couldn't get by hunting. Greenland at that time Greenland is a very big island, and there are small settlements all along the coast. Very often there's some 100 miles or 200 miles between these very small settlements, and all the people were living of hunting especially seals. There were quite a lot of seals and birds, walrus, and for the people in the very north, there were ice bears to hunt. The country was isolated from the rest of the world. You had to have permission from the government in Denmark to go to Greenland, and everything, all the shops were owned by the government. During the summer, boats came from Denmark with people and with goods, and they went back to Denmark with the things, the fur and the blubber, and what they have bought, and also with some minerals. There were two mines in Greenland, one with cryolite in the south and one with marble in the north. Greenland, as I tell you, was a very close community. There was no electricity, there was no cars, there were no roads. You could go by boat from one part to another, but there was no other way of being transported. In 1940, the Second World War started, and Denmark was occupied by the Germans. And all the trade in Greenland was taken care of. All the trade in Greenland was taken care of the United States. The United States was very interested in the mineral cryolite that was in the southern Greenland, because it was a very important part of making aluminum. And it was the only place in the world where they had this. The Germans, they had to make it an artificial cryolite. But the Americans had this, and that was very important, especially during the Second World War, because the airplanes were being very important. The United States wanted to have some Air Force bases in Greenland, because the trip from United States to England was a bit too long at that time. The airplanes had to get fuel, and they got this in Greenland. So they built a modern city with an airfield, several thousand people, And they had electricity, and they had roads, and they had cars, and they had everything that a modern society had. And it was something very new for Greenland to see these things. Normally in Greenland, if you are a child of a Danish tradesman, you would go to Denmark for school. There was no schools in Greenland in Danish language. There was small schools where they learned to read and write in the Greenland language. But normally, children were sent to Denmark when they were 10 years old. Before they were 10 years old, their mother would do the teaching. But I was 10 years old in 1944, and the war was still on, and we couldn't go to Denmark. So I went with my 8-year-old sister alone to the United States, and went to live with a Danish family in New York State. They had 3 kids, but they spoke only English. And I went to an American school and learned English. It was quite something coming from a very primitive Greenland to a modern city in the United States. After the war, we went to Denmark, and I went to a boarding school, and I stayed at this boarding school for 7 years. My parents were in Greenland. They sometimes had vacation. They came to Denmark and was in Denmark for half a year or a whole year, and then they went to Greenland and were there for 5 years or so. And that was normally. I visit my parents during the summer vacation, but not every year. It was very difficult to find boats to bring you to Greenland. It took normally 3 weeks to come up there and 3 weeks back again. And the summer holidays, they were 7 weeks, so that you could stay at home for 1 or maybe 2 weeks. That was all. I know one of my friends, he's dead now. He was an artist, and he had the same. He was born in Greenland and came to Denmark and lived most of his time in Denmark. And he was asked this question very often: "Are you a Dane or are you a Greenlander?" And he said, "I am Jens Rossing." That was his name. It's very difficult. I am both. I have my childhood in Greenland, but I have been working a long time in Greenland. After my school, I went to the Danish Navy. We have to go into the military, and I was sent to a Danish, what do you call it? No, a military city that took care of the military boats in Greenland. And I went to one of the American Air Force bases. There was a Danish liaison officer and 5,000 Americans. All the officers had their wives and kids, and it was like an American city. And we were 2 Danish soldiers who had to take the flag up and down again in the evening and help the liaison officer. After this, that was in 6 months of this. And after my military duty, I went to university and started reading as a civil engineer. But in the summertime, when the university was closed, I got a job going to Greenland, a small group of land surveyors from the engineer department, making maps of where the houses were going to be built and the roads and so on. Making maps of the whole town was not possible at that time. So we went up with an engineer who knew we were going to make map for a road going from this place to this place. That was a few hundred meters. Or a harbor, or for a house, an old age pension house or anything. And we visit all these small villages along the coast all the summer. And then I went back to school, university, and next summer, a new job like that. So I have been to most of the towns and small villages along the western coast of Greenland. When I was in Greenland as a student at the university, we were a group of 4 people, 2 engineers and 2 students. And one of these engineers was going to build a harbor where in the small village where my father lived, and the other, he was a leader of the civil engineering department. After I was a professor, and one of these people, he was a professor at the university, and I became a professor at the same university, and had worked with him a lot of time, but then he died very, very suddenly. And when we went to his funeral, I met with the other engineer that was in our group at that time. And he told me that this was in the beginning of the 80s. Greenland at that time had got their own home rule, and they wanted to move all the things to Greenland. It was so that the technical building of Greenland, with all the harbors and houses and hospitals, was made in Denmark by engineers living in Denmark, working in Denmark. All of them, except one, were Danes. And they went to Greenland in the summer, maybe joining a group who was surveying, and then coming back in winter and drawing all this. They had a lot of experience. It's very different making houses, sewages, water, drinking water in Greenland than in Denmark. Especially there's problems with what's called permafrost that you have in Greenland because it's colder than freezing as the average of the year. When you dig down, it's frozen. When you build a house on top of it and you heat it, it starts melting and the building sinks. And there was a lot of problems of this kind. They have the same in Canada and Alaska, but in Greenland it was very bad. And they learned all these things. But if they were moved to Greenland, this department with all the engineers, only a few of the Danish engineers would go along with them. So they needed engineers in Greenland. And the only way to have, and they could get an engineer from Denmark, he would stay there for 1 year or 2 years, and he would go back to Denmark, and all his experience will just disappear. So what he said, what is needed is engineers who will stay in Greenland. And so we had to give the Greenland youth an opportunity to become engineers. We should make a Greenland engineer. And we met with this new home rule government, and they just didn't care. We had a young Greenland man who had been educated in Denmark and who was working in Godthaab, Nuuk, the main city. And he went down to the political people and he wrote us, they are not interested. And we worked on it. We made a group in Denmark who tried to go into details. What would it cost? How would it be made? We sent the papers to Greenland and they had no interest. Then in 1996, I was in Greenland with a group of Danish students, 40 students, making a summer study in Greenland of the permafrost and all these things. And then we took contact with the government, and suddenly things had changed, they thought this was interesting. So we went down in all the details, had contacts with people in Greenland, made studies of it. How should this what do you call it? No. Yeah, it's studium. Yeah, a study. No.
Study group or?
No, we were trying to plan an education from the start to the beginning. We found out that we couldn't make a whole engineer in Greenland. That would be very bad. It should not be limited in geographical or in ethnical. The engineer we would make should be one like the Danish engineers who are accepted internationally. They can go anywhere in the world and work, because so they should start in Greenland and then they should end up in Denmark and going together with the Danish young people who are studying engineer. And we built up special plans for it. And in 2001, 17 years later than this start, we started with the first group. And there were 9 young people from Greenland, quite a lot of girls. I think half of them were girls. That's not common with engineers. And then there were one student coming from Denmark. And we started in Greenland, and the teachers came from Denmark, went up and taught for 2 weeks or 3 weeks, one subject all the time, starting in the morning, giving some lectures, in the afternoon, practical work. In my case, they went out into the mountains and made measurements, surveying of different kinds. And when these 3 weeks were over, or it was different, they would write a report, the teacher would read it, and then they would give marks and have the students one at a time showing them what they did good and what was wrong. So they learned everything. And when this was over, a new teacher came to Greenland, the other went back, and then another subject was taught for the next 3 weeks. And this is a very efficient way of doing it. And you don't, if you have one subject in the morning and another in the afternoon, you would have to have all these teachers gathered. Here you had one teacher or 2 teachers, and they would stay in Greenland for 3 weeks and then back to the university again. And that's one of the advantages, having a big university, and then this as a small part of it. And if a teacher got sick or had another job, we could easily get another to come, because it was a big university with many people. They stayed in Greenland for 3 semesters. That's 1.5 years. Then they took a half year of practical work. I don't think it's like that now. It's another, but they go to an engineering firm and work for them for half a year. And then they went to Denmark, were mingled with the Danish students, and then they finished. And their final project, I think it's called, they should make this in Greenland. So they went back to Greenland, making the final project together with some organizations there. And then they were finished as engineers. One of the main things of this was to have the students coming back to Greenland when they were finished. It's very often so that if a young person coming from the outside, the periphery of the country, they come to the big city, they get an education, and then they don't go home again. So all this building Greenland is building, really, it's building Denmark, taking the best people from Greenland. But now they come back again, and I think it's more than 90% of the students are back in Greenland working now. At the moment, there is more than 50 engineers of Greenland already.